this is the Lido Show again.
The Lido
Telltale. I'm Greg.
I'm Emily.
Back with another review, this time of classic science fiction adventure. Witch of the Demon Seas. Now, Witch of the Demon Seas was published in Planet Stories magazine in January 1951 by A.A. Craig. Now, thing that needs to be noted about that is there is no such person as A.A. Craig. The actual writer of this story was Poul Anderson, who was a very well-known science fiction writer. He's written some great classics like Tau Zero and The Earth Book of Stormgate. This was one of his very early stories. So he was at the start of his career. I think he started writing in 1949, and this was published in 51, so he was only like 3 years into his career. All of his best work was ahead of him at this time. But he published 2 stories in this magazine. And back in the days of the pulp magazines, if the editor wanted to put 2 of your stories in, he wouldn't put them both in, and yes, they always were men. He wouldn't put them both in under your own name. Because that they just thought that looked goofy. So they had these house names.
Yeah.
Like Alexander Blade was a famous one that Amazing Stories used. And A.A. Craig was a house name for Planet Stories. So they published 2 stories by Poul Anderson in the same issue. And so they gave this, and I don't know why they gave the lead story the house name. And then put Poul, of course he wasn't all that well known back then. So
maybe it didn't matter. They were just like,
didn't have any
just throw one on it and go.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you found the actual issue. Oh, I actually really love this cover so much.
So this is the actual January 1951 issue of Planet Stories.
It's awesome.
In its very brittle yellow paper. And the cover, Witch of the Demon Seas by A.A. Craig, also fantastic. Poul Anderson, Alfred Koppel, Bryce Walton. Some good writers in this issue. But Planet Stories wasn't the best magazine, especially for today's audiences that are a little more sensitive about issues of minority groups having been stereotyped. Planet Stories had a bad reputation of stereotyping women as these frail things that need to be rescued, and well, even on this cover, the artists made them larger than life.
I love this cover. That actually
that's one of the nicer covers, and Witch of the Demon Seas is one of the more palatable stories from Planet Stories. And so in that way, modern audiences can enjoy it because it doesn't have the really stereotypical attitude towards women that many of the stories had. Yeah. And his other story is actually better known. The other story he wrote for this issue. I forget what it was, but so this story has also been published in book collections by Anderson under the title Demon Journey. And it wasn't anthologized very much until ebooks came along, and now it's in the public domain, and so there's all kinds of ebooks available with this story. And of course you can get the original
Good luck
issue.
finding it.
Well, no, I didn't have a hard time.
Oh, really?
And that's a really good, for that age, the paper those were printed on, that's an amazing
this is a very,
condition.
I am surprised you even found one, actually.
Yeah.
But this is a phenomenal, I just love the cover. I love the illustration. If I could get this as a poster, I would. I love it.
And I can't remember who did the cover. I want to say it was Van Dongen who did much nicer work later on. All the way into the 1980s, maybe even the 1990s. H.R. Van Dongen was a major science fiction illustrator.
Okay.
And if I'm not wrong, I think he did this cover. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. I love it.
Yeah, Anderson published his first story in 1947. So he had been publishing for 4 years.
Okay.
when this was published. And they call it a novel by A.A. Craig. It's not a novel.
No.
It's only about 80 pages in here.
Yeah, it has little chapters, but it's not. They're not
Yeah.
very long. They're only like 4 pages long.
It's novelette length.
Yeah, pretty much.
And so, of course, for such a short novel, being written in 1951 in a pulp magazine, you don't have a huge, deep character development. You don't have huge, deep world building.
No.
You didn't have room for that in here. It was just get in there, have lots of fun adventures, and get out. And they're fun reads. They're very fun reads, these old science fiction stories. Do you want to give the synopsis?
Yeah, I'll give the synopsis.
You have so much better memory for it than I do.
This one was super fun. So basically, it's on another planet where there's several racial groups and different like empires, and this one empire kind of took over everybody else's empires, basically, and either enslaved or assimilated those cultures. And there's this one rebel who was part of the royalty, it seemed, of one of the cultures that this empire took over, and he became a pirate and had caused a lot of mischief and trouble for this empire, so they finally caught him. And when he was caught, he is approached by a sorceress and her grandfather, I think he is. Some kind of elder family member, I think it was grandfather. And they're both powerful sorcerers, and they basically said, like, hey, we'll get you out of this prison if you help us go to the one place you never want to return to, which is the Demon Sea. And the Demon Sea is basically this culture of amphibious merfolk that kind of have this on-land, undersea kind of world that they live in, and they're pretty much untouched. They're the only culture that this empire is not taken over. And these two sorcerers, or sorcerer and sorceress, want to use their abilities that they have used to prevent the empire from taking them over to basically seize the empire itself. So they recruit him with the promise that once we take things over, you're going to get well treated. We're going to make sure that you're taken care of. But he's pretty sure they're not going to come out of it alive, because he barely made it out alive the first time he and his crew went, and he lost a lot of people. So they kind of go there and get captured intentionally, sort of. Not really captured, but they kind of have this little melee between the two to, pissing contest. And just kind of then get led to the leaders of the demons, as they call them. I don't think they even had another cultural name, kind of thing.
Yeah, I can't remember.
But along the way to the Demon Sea, he starts falling in love with a sorceress, and she's got this evil dragon thing, and it's just, they have this whirlwind romance that doesn't really make any sense. It just adds drama to the story. But yeah, it ends up being one of those situations where she's also under the spell of her grandfather, and so he thinks when they get there, he kind of eavesdrops on a conversation and thinks she's evil, but she's not. She's just being controlled. There's a lot of explosions, a lot of people murdered and stabbed and killed and speared and stuff. So it's a very fast-paced action romance, very typical sci-fi of the 1950s.
Yeah.
And it's good. It was pretty enjoyable.
Yeah, and Poul Anderson was a major science fiction writer. He wrote some classic stories. This is not his best work, but still, it shows his strengths as a storyteller and his strengths with fantasy and science fiction. One of the things I note about this, it's a science fiction story, but you really could easily remove the science fiction from it, set it on the Caribbean with pirates.
And not blue people.
Yeah, and just make it a total fantasy.
Yeah.
An historical fantasy.
Yeah, it translates pretty well between either category.
Yeah, and so, and Poul Anderson wrote a lot of fantasy, and so I kind of half think he wrote this as like a Pirates of the Caribbean style fantasy, but the only magazine that was interested was Planet Stories, so he had to add some science fiction.
We're going to add some blue people.
So
we're going to talk about the planet being different. We're going to allude to some stuff here intergalactically. done.
Mm-hmm.
Very subtle. Very subtly done, though. So, yeah, it reads more like a fantasy than it actually does a science fiction.
Yeah.
If it weren't for the blue people.
Yeah. But it is a good, quick adventure.
Mm-hmm.
Like we say, if you're used to, 800-page Brandon Sanderson adventures, this isn't going to cut it for you. This is too simple, too basic, too quick.
And yeah,
but
too short.
If you want something that's just a quick read, it's a lot of fun, a lot of adventure, classic science fiction, early work by a major author, and something you can read in one sitting and just enjoy. And it doesn't have anything really intellectual or deep or anything like that about it. This is a good story for that.
Yeah, it's got good drama. It's got good romance. I did not feel like the female, I don't even know, protagonist, antagonist, the female lead, I didn't feel like she was as cardboard or as helpless as some people portray women in this particular era, especially in science fiction. She seemed pretty powerful. Of course, sex was also part of the power, but why wouldn't it be? You know what I mean? Like, it is what it is. So.
And that was, that kind of storyline was part of what Planet Stories was selling. Though usually it was your stereotypical weak female has to be rescued.
Yeah, she's pretty powerful.
Wearing nothing, and it was written for teenage boys, and that's the typical Planet Stories fiction.
Yeah.
This one kind of defied that and got a little bit more sophisticated about it.
Yeah, it was actually really well done. I wasn't there are some generalizations made about women, but who doesn't do that, even in women's culture? Like, that's just a Western culture thing to do. It's just, not that it's right, but it happens.
A writer writing today can't do that. Absolutely must not do that. But this was 1951. It was a different culture.
Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily good that our culture was that way, but that is kind of how everybody thought.
Yeah, we are becoming more, I don't want to say sensitive, because it's not even about sensitivity. We're becoming more practical about the things we're learning as a culture now, where we don't make those generalizations as much, unless it perpetuates the storyline in some manner. I
think in a lot of ways we're growing out of our past habits of isolating groups that are different from us and being able to accept a wide variety, a lot of different types of people.
Yes.
And see them as equals. Where in 1951, that was not easy for most people to do.
Yes.
And especially in science fiction, most of the readers and even a lot of the writers, they had no experience with women. Let's face it. They were not the popular guys in school. They were not all that experienced and didn't really know how to write women.
I'm laughing because there's this video I once saw. It's like, tell me why women don't like you without telling me why women don't like you. And it's like this guy, he goes, women are intimidated by my sweet wizard tapestry. And it's just this giant picture, like giant blanket of this huge wizard with and that just made me laugh. It's like, yeah, guys who wrote these were not, because they had sweet wizard tapestries. I think it's cool.
Well, most of them didn't have that. Most of them were math majors with physics books and
gross. You said math, and I'm like, physically repulsed.
No, math is cool.
I mean, yes, it is cool. It is essential, but it doesn't mean I enjoy it.
It's hard.
It is very hard. Doesn't mean I enjoy it. I can be good at it in some cases, but it doesn't mean I like it. No, but yeah,
I mean, and while the joke's on everybody else that these guys wrote great stories and discovered great scientific things and invented computers and wrote the laws of robotics and
yep, all the things.
Yeah.
So
they made the money.
Yeah. I liked this story, though. I thought it was pretty good.
It was good.
I wasn't offended by anything. I thought it was a pretty fun, quick read. I I had a hard time envisioning, without the cover, this particular creature. So I was a little frustrated by that, because the way they described it was more like I was just like envisioning a scaly pit bull, basically. Like this really scary, like muscular looking, and I'm like, big muscular. I think of like a big pit bull that's kind of dragony and teeth and like claws. Like I had more of like this mammal lizard mashup going on.
Okay.
Based off of that description. That was the only thing that actually frustrated me, was I was really having a hard time with how they described this creature. But now it's like, oh, it's a dragon. Okay.
Yeah.
Should have guessed.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Okay, so a classic science fiction adventure, which is just light, fun reading.
Yes.
Can't beat that.
It's good.
Easy.
Easy, fun.
It's what you want when you want to be entertained. You know,
Mm-hmm.
everything can't be Finnegan's Wake.
Oh yeah,
Everything
and it just
shouldn't
had good
be
humor.
Finnegan's Wake.
This had some pretty funny, like good humor, kind of sarcastic humor that was really like witty and fun.
Mm-hmm.
And it was good banter. I enjoyed it. That was good.
So, where does it land on our scale?
I'd have to say this isn't a top tale for me.
Okay.
Personally.
Okay.
But it definitely is a fun adventure.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't consider this the highest literature ever or anything like that, but it was fun. It was quirky. It was a pleasure to read amidst heavier reading that I have done and had been doing. So I found it more of like a fun reprieve, but not, I wouldn't call this the high literature or anything like that, or even like super like it's not the most memorable story for me.
Yeah.
I wasn't impressed with it. I didn't like take away some great moral value or anything like that. It just was kind of like, this is good. I like it.
Although I think a fun adventure can be a top tale.
Yes, I agree.
But this one, this is at the beginning of Poul Anderson's career. He would go on to write so much greater work than this.
Yes.
So this is not a top tale.
No.
This is beaten out by other works by Poul Anderson, but other works that other writers were doing at that time definitely eclipse this. But I would recommend it.
Yes, I would definitely recommend
If you
this.
want something fun to read in a single evening, you don't have to go and look for the actual magazine.
Yeah.
You can get it off of, I think archive.org has it, and Project Gutenberg has a copy of it. Download it and read it.
Yeah, it is a fun little story. If you like sci-fi, if you like pirate fantasies, this, and it's actually pretty appropriate for young adults, because a lot of the like romance and sexual stuff was not explicit.
No, it's
so
not
it was
that
super.
fun.
It's super good for, I think, a wide variety and a wide range of readers. I think that would it was good enough that I would recommend it as a quick fun read.
Yeah, this is the kind of science fiction I started reading when I was 12 years old. And so that 12-year-old that wants to get into imaginative literature, this is a good start. Good place to start.
Yep. So yeah.
Okay.
That's all I got to say.
That's all I got to say. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for
We'll have more.
Have a good one, guys.
Bye.
Bye.